You mapped my life, my habits, my body, my grief. Serafina didn't move, didn't defend, didn't interrupt. It looks like I'm living with someone who built a custom cage and designed it specifically for me. Marin said, yes. The word landed heavy. Final. I watched you, Serafina said. I studied you. I created the situation that led you to that bar. Marin went still. Your client, Serafina continued quietly. The one who dropped you? That decision came from me. The air vanished. You made me desperate. Yes, so I'd say yes. Yes, no hesitation, no denial. Each answer hit like a fracture spreading through glass. Why? Marin asked. Why me? And this time, Serafina didn't hide. I saw your work, she said. A gallery. 2 years ago. No one knew who I was. I wasn't Serafina Gates that night. Just another person in a quiet room. Her voice softened. You had a collection there. Broken things turned into something else. A breath. And I couldn't look away. She met Marin's eyes, fully without armor. You made something out of ruin that looked like it could still fly. Silence stretched between them, and I thought, her voice nearly broke, if anyone could rebuild something shattered, it would be you. The moment with the shattered piano piece had never really left Serafina. It had only been waiting for the right moment to be understood. She spoke slowly, like every word had weight. That sculpture, the one shaped like wings, it had stopped her, completely. For 20 minutes she had stood there, unable to move, unable to breathe, because someone had taken something destroyed, something beyond repair, and turned it into something impossibly beautiful. And in that moment, she had realized something dangerous. Whoever created that understood broken things, understood what it meant to fall apart and still become something more. Then Marin had walked up beside her, no recognition, no calculation, just presence. Marin had looked at the piece, then at her, and said something simple, something that cut deeper than anything Serafina had ever heard. Most people only see what's broken. The interesting ones see what it's becoming, and she had smiled, not at a CEO, not at power, not at money, at her, at Serafina as a person. That had been the moment everything shifted, because no one had ever looked at her like that before, not once. So yes, she had watched Marin after that, followed her life from a distance, studied her patterns. Not because she wanted to hurt her, but because she didn't know how to want something without trying to control it. That was the truth. Every person Serafina had ever cared about had been taken from her in one way or another. And somewhere along the way, she had convinced herself that control was the only way to survive that kind of loss. If she controlled the structure, if she designed the rules, if she built the cage herself, then maybe, just maybe, she wouldn't be blindsided when it all fell apart. She could prepare for it, sample it, contain it. But that logic had consequences, because control didn't protect love, it distorted it. And when Marin brought up Lily Mercer again, the truth came out without resistance. Lily hadn't been trapped. She had been lost. Serafina finally sat down, not behind a desk, not in control, but on the floor like someone who had nothing left to defend. And this time she didn't hold anything back. Lily had been a photographer. Young, sharp, unpredictable in a way that made Serafina feel something real for the first time in her life. And yes, the beginning had been the same: observation, planning, proximity, then the contract, a harsher version back then, less refined, more control, less care. But Lily had pushed back, challenged her, disrupted her structure, and somehow that had made things better until Blair. Blair Ashford hadn't just been an ex. She had been the first woman Serafina ever loved, and the one who understood exactly how to dismantle her, not loudly, not violently, quietly, precisely. When Lily came into the picture, Blair didn't confront it directly. She started unraveling Lily's life instead. Clients disappeared. Opportunities vanished. Calls stopped being returned. It looked like bad luck, but it wasn't. It was systematic. And when that wasn't enough, it became personal, anonymous messages. Photos taken from a distance, break-ins where nothing was stolen, only disturbed, just enough to make Lily feel watched. Unsafe unraveling. Serafina had tried to stop it. Hired security. Confronted Blair, but Blair was too careful, too experienced. No proof, no leverage. And Lily started breaking under the pressure. She stopped sleeping, stopped eating, stopped leaving the penthouse, until one night, she was just gone. No warning, no goodbye. Serafina spent weeks searching, and when she finally found her, Lily wasn't Lily anymore. Different name, different city, different life. And one request: erase me, not metaphorically. Completely, no digital trace, no records, no connection to the life she used to have. Because as long as she existed as Lily Mercer, Blair could find her, so Serafina did it. Every account, every file, every searchable piece of her existence gone. Not out of control, out of desperation, it was the only way to keep her safe. And then she let her go. For good, the silence that followed wasn't empty. It was heavy, because everything Maren thought she understood had shifted. Lily hadn't been erased as a victim. She had chosen to disappear. And Serafina had been the one strong enough, or broken enough, to make it happen. The contracts, the surveillance, the obsession. It all traced back to that failure. That fear at first. The contract had been a disguise, a way to make love look transactional, invisible to someone like Blair. But over time, the disguise had become real, because that's what happens with control. It starts as protection, and ends as a cage. Serafina admitted it without defense. She didn't know how to do it differently. Every time she tried to protect someone, she ended up trapping them. And by the time she realized it, they were already gone. Maren listened to all of it. Every word, every fracture. And when she finally moved, it wasn't impulsive, it was deliberate. She stepped closer, but not to comfort blindly, to confront honestly. What Serafina had done to her wasn't okay. Not the surveillance, not the manipulation, not the engineered desperation, none of it. And she wasn't going to pretend it was. But at the same time, she didn't see a monster. She saw someone who had survived something damaging enough to rewire how she understood love. Someone using broken tools because no one had ever given her better ones. That didn't excuse anything, but it explained everything. And for Maren, that difference mattered. Serafina told her she shouldn't trust her. Maren didn't argue. She simply made it clear that decision wasn't Serafina's to make. For once, control didn't belong to her. Then Maren did something small, but irreversible. She reached out carefully and took Serafina's hand, not as forgiveness, not as romance, as grounding, as proof that she wasn't walking away. Not yet. For a brief, unguarded moment, Serafina held on like it was the only steady thing left in her world, and then Maren let go. Because staying didn't mean surrendering, it meant thinking, breathing, choosing. She left the room to find space. Because what she had just learned didn't fit neatly into fear or trust, it existed somewhere in between. And that space was dangerous. 2 nights later, everything shifted again. The kitchen was still long past midnight when Maren finally gave in to wakefulness. The seam had stopped being an option hours ago. Her thoughts kept circling the same thing. The tablet, the spreadsheets, the drafts of a contract that had reshaped her entire life before she ever knew it was being rewritten. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw it again. Structured, precise, intentional. Like her existence had been filed away and studied before she even arrived. She ended up in the kitchen for water. Serafina was already there, sitting at the counter in silence with a glass of whiskey she hadn't touched. Still in her work clothes, collar loosened, hair slightly undone. Not composed in the way she usually was, but exhausted in a way that stripped the performance away. Maren should have turned back. That distance between them had been deliberate since the office confrontation. A careful, controlled space where nothing was admitted and nothing was asked too soon. But she didn't leave. She stepped in anyway, poured herself water, and sat 2 stools away. Neither of them spoke. The city outside carried on as if nothing had changed. Distant traffic. A siren somewhere far off. The hum of the refrigerator filling the gaps between 2 people sitting in a silence too heavy to be casual. Eventually, Serafina spoke. The sculpture from the auction had been moved to storage. It could be delivered if Maren wanted it. It had always been hers, in Serafina's mind. Maren looked at her slowly. The way she spoke made everything sound like logistics, like transactions, like ownership explained in careful language that tried not to sound like control. She pointed out the price, $50,000. Serafina answered without hesitation. The 600 had been an insult. It didn't reflect what it was worth. Maren's gaze held steady. Every word from Serafina carried that same contradiction. Precision that sounded like calculation, but felt like something closer to devotion. Finally, Maren broke it. She asked why everything Serafina said sounded like a deal being negotiated and a confession trying not to be one at the same time. Serafina's grip tightened around the glass. When she answered, it wasn't rehearsed. It wasn't polished. It was uncertain, because she didn't know how to separate care from control anymore. The two had fused too tightly over time. Maren didn't let it soften her. She told her plainly that people couldn't be acquired. That love wasn't something to be mapped, measured, or structured into obedience. Serafina finally looked at her, and that was when Maren stopped speaking mid-sentence, because there was nothing guarded left in her expression, nothing calculated. Only exposure. Maren finished anyway. Serafina couldn't keep looking at her like she was the answer to something unresolved inside her, like she had been waiting her entire life for Maren to appear in front of her. That was the part that made it impossible to ignore. The kitchen felt smaller as Maren stood up. The space between them collapsed slowly, deliberately, until there was nothing left but proximity, and everything neither of them had said out loud. Serafina rose too. Not confidently, not in control, like she was bracing for impact she both feared and wanted. Maren walked around the counter. Each step was intentional. Each step closed the distance further until there was no room left for avoidance. Serafina's breathing shifted, controlled at first, then uneven. Her body reacting before her mind could intervene. The air between them changed heavier, sharper. Maren told her to stop her if she needed to. Serafina's voice came out strained, barely holding together. She didn't want this to stop. She had wanted it for longer than she could admit. From the moment, Maren stood beside her in a gallery and looked at her like she was human instead of a position or a name. Every day since had been restraint. Every moment had been resistance. And she was done resisting. That was all it took. Maren grabbed her collar and pulled her in. The kiss wasn't careful. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't something that asked permission from hesitation. It came out of frustration, out of everything unsaid, out of months of pressure with nowhere to go. Serafina responded like something inside her finally gave way, like she had been holding her breath for years and had just been allowed to inhale again. Her hands came up to Maren's face immediately, not possessive, not controlling, anchoring, holding her like she was something real and fragile and impossible to lose again. Maren pressed her back against the counter. Serafina followed without hesitation. The sound she made wasn't composed or controlled. It broke through every layer she had ever built to contain herself. And for the first time, she didn't feel like a CEO. She felt like someone finally allowed to want something without consequence. When they separated, it was only slightly. Foreheads resting together, breath uneven, the silence between them no longer empty, but charged. Maren spoke first. This didn't fix anything. It didn't erase what Serafina had done. And it didn't rebuild trust. Serafina agreed without resistance. She understood that. She understood that nothing about this was forgiveness, only honesty. Maren's voice dropped lower. If Lily's story wasn't the truth, if anything Serafina had said was incomplete or false, then everything between them would end. Serafina didn't argue. She simply nodded. And for the first time, there was no strategy behind her response. Only acceptance. Maren stayed there for a moment longer, then stepped back. The space returned slowly, reluctantly. She left the kitchen first, and Serafina didn't follow. She stayed in the silence. Fingers still trembling slightly where Maren had held her, because something irreversible had just happened between them. A line had been crossed, and neither of them knew yet what it would cost. But far beyond the walls of the penthouse, someone else was already moving. Blair Ashford had been watching, waiting. And the moment she confirmed what had changed between Serafina and Maren, she began making calls, because attachment was a weakness. And she intended to use it. The next morning arrived quietly. Nothing was spoken about the night before. Nothing was acknowledged. Maren woke alone in the guest room, staring at the ceiling long after sunrise. The kiss replayed in fragments she couldn't fully control. The way Serafina held her, the way she broke, the way she didn't feel like power in that moment, only presence. Downstairs, Serafina was already dressed for work. Composed again, coffee in hand, Mace fully restored, like nothing had happened. They passed each other in the kitchen with careful neutrality. Good morning, morning. No mention of midnight, no mention of anything. But the silence between them was no longer empty. It was charged with memory, and neither of them could pretend otherwise. That morning, Maren called Ren, and for the first time, she spoke out loud about what she was beginning to understand. How something could feel like danger and intimacy at the same time, and how impossible it was becoming to separate the two. Ren listened carefully, then said what Maren didn't want to hear. That none of it changed the imbalance. That control wasn't softened just because it came with emotion, and that love. If that's what it was, didn't cancel out power, it only complicated it. And somewhere in that conversation, Maren realized the hardest truth of all. Whatever she was feeling for Serafina, it wasn't safe, not yet, and maybe not ever. They were in the kitchen long after midnight. Maren hadn't been able to sleep. The discovery of the tablet kept looping through her mind in sharp, restless fragments. She wandered out for water and found Serafina already there. She was sitting at the counter with a glass of whiskey she wasn't drinking, still dressed from work, tie loosened, hair slightly undone. She looked like exhaustion had been shaped into something almost beautiful. Maren should have turned back. She had been keeping distance since the office confrontation, a careful space between them that said nothing was settled yet. But instead she walked in, poured water, and sat 2 seats away. Neither of them spoke for a long time. The city hummed beyond the glass, distant traffic, a siren fading somewhere far off. The refrigerator's quiet pulse filling the silence between 2 people. Sitting inside something too large for words, Serafina spoke first. The sculpture from the auction. I had it moved into storage, but if you want it, it's yours. It was always meant for you. You paid $50,000 for it. I paid what it deserved. The $600 was an insult. It was the highest offer anyone had made. Then everyone before me failed to see it properly. Maren looked at her in the low kitchen light. Serafina didn't look like a CEO in that moment. She looked like someone who had forgotten how to be anything except alone with her thoughts. Why do you always speak like everything is a transaction? Serafina's fingers tightened around the glass. Her eyes stayed lowered. Because I don't know any other language that feels safe. That's your problem. I know. Silence returned, heavier this time. Maren stepped closer without fully deciding to, drawn by something she didn't yet understand. The space between them collapsed slowly, until she stood directly in front of Serafina, with nothing left but breath and tension. Serafina rose from the stool in response, as if her body had already accepted what her mind was resisting. The air between them shifted tight and charged. Tell me to stop. Nothing came. Tell me this is wrong. It's wrong. Tell me you don't want it. Serafina's gaze dropped briefly to Maren's mouth before returning to her eyes. I have wanted this since the moment you stood beside me in that gallery. Every day since has been an exercise in restraint. I won't pretend otherwise anymore. Maren grabbed her collar and kissed her. Not gentle, not careful. It carried everything she hadn't been able to say out loud, everything that had built up in anger, fear, and inevitability. Serafina reacted like something that had been held underwater, too long, finally breaking the surface. Her hands came up to Maren's face, holding her as if letting go might erase the moment entirely. Her fingers slid into Maren's hair, trembling at the edges of control, not taking, only anchoring. Maren pressed her back against the counter. Serafina followed without hesitation, her composure dissolving into something raw and unguarded. A sound escaped her that didn't belong to boardrooms or strategy or control, but to something far more human. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing unevenly, foreheads resting together. This doesn't mean trust, Maren said quietly. I know, and it doesn't mean forgiveness. I know that too. Good. Serafina pressed a soft kiss to her forehead. More than you realize, she whispered. They stayed there in the dark kitchen, holding on without speaking, as if acknowledging movement might break whatever fragile balance had just formed. Neither of them moved for a long time, because something irreversible had already shifted, and neither of them knew yet that outside that quiet apartment, something far less gentle was already beginning to move toward them. The words came out flat and absolute, delivered with the same calm certainty as a weather report. Maren should have been disturbed by that kind of certainty, but instead something else settled in her chest. Not fear, protection, not control, not ownership. Protection. The kind of feeling that comes when someone steps between you and danger without hesitation. Not because they think you're fragile, but because the idea of you being harmed is unacceptable to them. What fire, Serafina? Serafina closed her eyes. When she opened them again, she lowered herself onto the stool like someone placing down a weight they had carried too long. 3 years ago, Lily's studio burned down. The official report called it an electrical fault. Old wiring, a building that hadn't been updated in decades. The investigation closed in 2 weeks. But it wasn't electrical. I can't prove it. That's the point. Blair never leaves evidence. She never holds the match herself. She hires people who know how to turn violence into accidents. Specialists who make destruction look like coincidence. The fire happened the night Lily was supposed to be inside. She had a late session scheduled. She should have been there until midnight. But she wasn't. Because I called her 20 minutes before it started. I asked her to come meet me. I created an excuse I don't even remember anymore. I just knew something was wrong. Blair had been too quiet. Blair is never quiet unless something is already in motion. You saved her life. I delayed what was already set in motion. Lily saw the aftermath the next morning. She saw what was left of her studio. She didn't need proof after that. She looked at me and understood the truth without needing evidence. She said as long as she stayed near me, she would never be safe. She left that night. And I erased her because she asked me to. Maren sat in silence as the weight of it settled in, slowly, heavy and unavoidable. Blair hadn't just destroyed someone. She erased them. And she had done it before. What matters to her is disappearance. Not survival, not truth, just absence. Now she's targeting everything around me. You, your mother, your work, anyone connected to you. Serafina's voice cracked slightly on the last word. She knows I can't survive losing someone like that again. She's expecting me to repeat what I did before. To step back, to remove myself, to protect you by disappearing from your life. I won't do it again. Serafina picked up her phone and made a call. Her voice was steady, controlled, precise. Thomas, I need every file on Ashford Holdings. Tax discrepancies, offshore structures, internal communications, anything that doesn't align with public filings. I want the Basel recording from 2019, unedited. I want it prepared for legal review by morning. The call ended. What are you doing? What should have been done years ago? Maren watched her change in real time. Not into a CEO, not into a victim. Something in between. A woman who had stopped absorbing damage and started redirecting it. Not calm, not cruel-focused. For the first time, Maren understood something without needing it explained. This wasn't control. This was retaliation shaped by years of restraint finally breaking. Within 72 hours, Blair Ashford's structure began collapsing. Accounts frozen, investigations triggered, board instability spreading through subsidiaries, leaked recordings surfacing in the right places at the right time. Not chaos prevention, by the third day, the foundation had already begun to crack in ways that could not be reversed. Serafina never mentioned it at home. She returned each night as if nothing had happened. Dinner, conversation, normal tone, careful attention, as though she hadn't dismantled an empire between meetings. Then Ren called. The voice on the other end was broken before the words even came. Maren, I need to tell you something. The woman who contacted me wasn't named Claire. Her name was Blair Ashford. Silence followed. I didn't know. I thought I was helping you. She made me believe she was trying to get you out. I told her everything. Debt, contract. The way you talked about Serafina, I didn't know she was using me. I didn't know she was the one behind everything. Maren said nothing at first. The anger came instantly, sharp and hot. Then something else followed it. Murmur, Ren's fear, Ren's warning, Ren's promise. If it gets bad, call me. Ren hadn't betrayed her. Ren had been manipulated. Used like every other weak point Blair could find. Maren's voice stayed steady. You didn't know. I should have known. You were trying to protect me. I can't hate you for that. Silence returned between them. After the call ended, Maren sat alone and felt something shift inside her. Not collapse, reorganization. Everything she thought was stable had been touched. Her mother, her friend, her life. All of it had been reached by the same hand, except one thing, the contract. She read it again that night, not as a document of control, but as something else entirely. A structure built with contradictions, clauses designed to bind, and hidden inside them something unexpected. Section 12, subsection 47. She almost missed it. It was buried deep in legal language, disguised between liability clauses and confidentiality terms. She read it once, then again, slower, and then she stopped breathing properly. In the event that the contracted party develops genuine romantic attachment to the contracting party, as declared solely by the contracted party, all terms of this agreement become immediately void. All debt obligations listed in Appendix A are forgiven in full. The contracted party retains all compensation outlined and is free to terminate the arrangement immediately, without penalty or restriction. The room went quiet in a way that felt unreal, not a cage, not a trap, a release clause, a way out that depended entirely on a truth Serafina had never forced, never demanded, never tried to fabricate. And for the first time since the beginning of all of this, Marin understood something terrifyingly simple. Nothing about Serafina Gates had ever been as one-dimensional as control. Marin read it a fourth time, because her mind refused to accept what her eyes were showing her. Serafina had built a self-destruct clause into her own contract. The moment Marin admitted genuine romantic attachment, even internally, the entire agreement collapsed. Every debt vanished. Every dollar of the $2 million was secured and released. She could leave with everything, owing nothing. No strings, no leverage, no cage. Serafina had designed the contract so that love itself became the exit, because she never believed anyone would stay if they were free to leave. Every gesture, every carefully studied preference, every surveillance note disguised as organization, every softened rewrite of a harsher draft, every midnight meal left outside a closed door, every expensive, impulsive auction bid on something she thought Marin might understand. All of it had come from a woman who expected abandonment the moment affection became real. The contract was never a cage. It was a farewell written in advance. Marin set the pages down and pressed her hands flat against the table as tears came without restraint. Not controlled, not quiet. The kind of collapse that strips breath and structure at the same time. She understood everything now. Serafina Gates had learned from loss that love always ends in departure. So she built systems, rules, and controlled environments where she could hold someone close while preparing for the moment they would leave. Clause 47 was not control. It was surrender disguised as structure, a way of saying love would be offered completely, even while expecting it to end. Marin sat with that understanding until silence filled every corner of the room. Then she packed a single bag, not luxury, not replacement, only what she arrived with: sketchbooks, clothes she already owned, a photograph of her mother. She activated Clause 47 and sent the required declaration. The response arrived minutes later: confirmation. Debt erased. Compensation transferred. Contract void. Freedom was immediate. She walked into the living room as the evening light faded through glass walls. Serafina sat near the window, still and quiet, watching the city without moving. She saw the bag instantly. Something inside her shifted, not dramatically, but like structure giving way after years of unseen strain. Marin spoke first, her voice steady. The clause had been found. The contract had been read completely. The intent behind it had been understood. Serafina admitted it had been buried deliberately. She had wanted it discovered only by someone who truly saw everything. She had built it to give choice where none existed, at the beginning. Marin placed her bag down gently, not as departure, but as decision paused. The debt had already been forgiven. The exit was already available. Nothing remained to enforce attachment, yet she did not leave. Instead, she stated that love had been declared, and that difference mattered more than any contract ever could. She chose something without structure, without enforcement, without guarantee. A beginning that required rebuilding everything from nothing. Serafina stood slowly, as if movement itself required permission. Years of control collapsed into hesitation, then into something fragile and unfamiliar. Marin stepped forward and closed the remaining distance. She spoke with clarity, refusing old systems of ownership, refusal, or fear. She stated that they would learn how to exist without control, without surveillance, without engineered outcomes. She stated that help would be necessary, and that learning would take time. Serafina listened as something long sealed inside her began to break open. Then she was pulled into an embrace that did not feel like possession or escape, but grounding. Real contact without structure. She held on as if stability itself had finally become possible. They remained there as night settled fully outside the glass. No contracts remained. No clauses governed the space between them. Only choice, untested and uncertain. The following morning arrived with quiet normality that felt unfamiliar. They sat together in a therapy room later that day. No physical distance erased the tension, but both remained present. Serafina spoke first. She described surveillance, engineered proximity, financial manipulation, and emotional construction designed to prevent abandonment. She described falling in love inside systems built to prevent loss. She admitted she did not know how to love without control. She stated she was present because she had been told to be, and because she feared repetition of past loss. The therapist acknowledged everything calmly, and directed the conversation toward beginning structure rather than collapse. Marin held Serafina's hand as an anchor, not as reassurance but as reality. They left together later, carrying no answers, only direction. Outside, a message arrived, a warning referencing fire, truth, and history not yet spoken. At the same moment, Serafina's expression changed completely, composure fractured, not outwardly but internally, as recognition overtook control. Another message followed, a name that should not have been possible: Lily Mercer, alive, present, returned, not hidden anymore, not gone. The past that was believed to have been erased had re-entered the story, carrying memory, consequence, and unfinished truth. The narrative shifted again. What had seemed resolved was only the surface of something deeper. Two sides of every history began to emerge, and only one had been fully understood. What came next would reshape everything that had already happened, and redefine everything still unfolding.